corruption in the system, both incentives and for threats. On the good side, for instance, they know how to play the naive people. They know how to play the people who want recognition. For example, you take Mike Leavitt, former governor of Utah, or current governor of Utah, or recent governor of Utah, Jon Huntsman, who's just made ambassador to China. Now, I can tell you from personal experience, these people are not conspirators in the system. These people are used because they are desperate to get ahead, and they love the recognition that having establishment recognition brings to them in their lives. Governor Jon Huntsman was the son of the famous oil magnate of Huntsman Energy, and these people are religious people. They've made foolish mistakes in terms of their business dealings. The older Huntsman got hooked into a very, very large multi-million-dollar investment in Russia, lost his shirt when they changed all the rules. He was talked into that by establishment people who were trying to build up Russia right after the phony fall of the Soviet Union, and he got snookered. Jon Huntsman is what I call, or Mike Leavitt, the perfect patsy. In other words, these are the people who are not corrupted, but because they are desperate, they come, for example, a state of Utah with a religious background, for example, of persecution. So on behalf of their church and their state, they're very anxious to gain the acceptance of the world, thinking that they're doing themselves a personal favor as well as their church, as well as their government. So they're very susceptible to being drawn in and rewarded by government. For example, Time magazine will do a very favorable article when they take a moderate position, and they see how they treat someone who takes a less moderate position, get excoriated in the press. So they don't have to be told directly, we're controlling you with this and that. They simply use very, very subtle inducements when they recognize people want to get ahead in life and will bend over backwards to do so. And so I'm sure Huntsman is doing everything the Obama administration wants him to do in terms of kowtowing to China. So to recap, we have 4 different levels, I believe, or categories of how the conspiracy is managed in terms of its personnel and how it grows and ascends in power. The lowest level, the 4th level, are people who know and see enough to see that there's a control system but have been told or think that it's benevolent. And although I won't give you any specific names of who I think is in that area because it's hard to tell who actually knows and sees, but I know that there have been people, and many people, in fact, who are doing, in fact, a lot of people in every agency of government see enough to know, in fact, everyone in politics who gets to be elected sees that there's a control system, sees that, especially when they go to Congress, they start to get the phone calls from the various people in positions saying, you're expected to do this, and we expect this and this of you. The pressure starts immediately whenever a freshman goes to Congress. They come away knowing that there's a control system, and oftentimes they rationalize it and say it's benevolent. So there's those who know that there's a control, think it's benevolent, those that know there's a control system but have been corrupted. And that's the majority of the people who do the dirty work in there. They're the hired guns, and they essentially learn to be predictable. The second level are planners and implementers. Those are the heavy hitters, the ones who actually know all that's going on, the Henry Kissingers of the world, the Brent Scowcrofts. And the top level are the actual controllers like David Rockefeller or the Rothschild people or Henry Kissinger, who I believe has gone up to that level. It's very important to understand the role of political parties in maintaining the status quo. My major objections with the electoral college system was that it guaranteed a two-party system. In other words, it guaranteed a winner-take-all. Whenever you have a winner-take-all of 51%, you guarantee that you will develop within the electorate this mentality. Unless I have a majority, I have nothing. And that induces compromise. Now, for example, in the parliamentary system, that's another political system whereby you have minority parties that you can win and have political power without having a majoritarian position. There's benefits to that. The problem with that, of course, is that you have increased factionalization in government. So you have smaller and smaller factions. And thus you have to cobble together a compromise of various different political parties in order to gain the winner-take-all majority of 51%. Unfortunately, some very unwise and strong arm-twisting tactics takes place in a parliamentary system in order to be elected, so the same corruption occurs. Our system is winner-take-all. You have nothing unless you win a majority position. And so the third party has always been disadvantaged in the United States in the sense that we are told you're throwing your vote away because you're taking away from the lesser of two evils in establishing a third party position. The third party has always been disadvantaged. To get one person in Congress, you've got to win somewhere at some time, and we can't pool our votes as you do in a parliamentary system where you can take all the libertarian votes all across the country and elect at least one candidate because they vote for the party or the Green Party. And that's how they make inroads, and they start. And to a certain extent, that would be beneficial to us if the Constitutional Party or the American Party or the Libertarian Party could get at least one representative in it. The only way we've been able to get one, for example, is have Ron Paul, who's a Libertarian, get elected as a Republican. It is possible for a third party to win. That's how the Republican Party came into it. It was the Whigs before then who were ousted by the Republicans. They started as a third party. It was young enough in our political history that large changes and upheavals could occur. And so the Republicans and Democrats became our two mainstream parties, and it's almost impossible to overcome that now. It's even easier to run as an independent than it is to get elected as a third party. And yet, because over time, people within the conservative movement have begun to realize that they have been co-opted many, many times through the Republicans. That the Republicans has always been the residual of conservative values within the United States, and ever since, I think primarily the Republican Party first became co-opted in a major way is when Eisenhower was elected in the 50s. There was a major effort, and books were written about how liberals infiltrated, played like they were Republicans in order to sow the seeds of dissent against Robert Taft, who was the major candidate against Dwight D. Eisenhower. Once again, Taft was viewed as an isolationist. In the war, he was viewed as someone who was against international cooperation, against the United Nations. Robert Taft was, in fact, our constitutional conservative of those days. And he was overcome by the establishment promoting Dwight Eisenhower, who turned out to be not a direct conspirator, in my opinion, but was a controlled president by his brother Milton Eisenhower, who was a globalist. Now, Eisenhower had, for example, a long history of succumbing to conspiratorial demands, especially as Supreme Commander in World War II, Operation Keelhaul, many of the great evils that he acquiesced to in World War II and the crimes against humanity of which he was personally responsible for, such as the killing of 2 million German prisoners through starvation and refusing to give them tents and other shelter against the winter. A very purposeful action that is very little known in history. Since the rise of conservatism of the Barry Goldwater time, there has been a need within the establishment to try to undermine dissent. The John Birch Society, for example, had to be undermined. It rose very rapidly to prominence through a house-to-house conversion and group meeting type of format. They had district directors. It was very effective talking to people individually, built a very strong organization, and it was targeted for destruction by the media as well as the Communist Party, even though it was mostly our own globalists in the media who wanted to destroy them. They also had to co-opt Barry Goldwater, and they did so in very subtle ways that I don't have time to go into here. But he was very much co-opted by his insider status as a former military high-ranking officer in the Air Force. allowing him to have insider access to certain military secrets, even after he left the military. It's feeling like you're part of the establishment and not wanting to lose that is very corrupting to conservatives. For example, Senator Bob Bennett of Utah, before he was a senator, he was the son of a senator. He was given the opportunity to run the company of Mullins and Associate, which was a PR company. It was a flat-out front for the CIA. They would cut out individuals and put them in as PR agents into his company. In fact, some of the Watergate burglars were under his employ during that period of time. But Bob Bennett was not a conspirator. He was just somebody just anxious to please the establishment. Oh, wow, I get to run a front for the CIA, and it's top secret, and this is a wonderful opportunity to serve my country. But that's how they use naive people in that regard. That's how they co-opt dissent. I'd like to start off, of course, with a quote from Carroll Quigley on the two political parties and how they are co-opted. He said, "The argument that the two parties should represent opposed ideals and policies of the right and the other of the left is a foolish idea acceptable only to doctrinaire and academic thinkers, and I might add, the normal American people. Instead, the two parties," he said, "should be almost identical so that the American people can, quote, throw the rascals out at any election without leading to any profound or extreme shifts in policy. Then it should be possible to replace it every 4 years if necessary by the other party, which will be none of these things, but will still pursue with new vigor approximately the same basic policies." Now, this is a conspiratorial quotation. Carroll Quigley spent the rest of his life, because he got into trouble writing the book Tragedy and Hope, he spent the rest of his life trying to debunk the idea that he had spawned conspiracy theories by these kinds of statements. This is as conspiratorial statement as I've ever read. It talks specifically about deception and using the two political processes and controlling the two political processes. It's an open admission of conspiracy. And yet he had the audacity to make write two major essays specifically debunking Allen's None Dare Call It a Conspiracy, my uncle's book, The Naked Capitalist, which was written actually as a critique of Carroll Quigley's book, Tragedy and Hope, and had the audacity to claim that they were misinterpreting him and misquoting him, when in fact the quotes are entirely accurate. To his credit, he was correct that they made certain generalizations that he had not made. He had not come out and openly stated that all of the international bankers. In fact, he made a big deal out of saying, "I have never said all the bankers, only some of the bankers." And that's an example of how we have to be very careful in the conservative movement about excessive generalizations that lead to the ability of the media to counter. And Glenn Beck often does this. He'll make excessive generalizations, which they'll show are specifically inaccurate in certain cases and make him look bad.
Visit Infowars.com and PrisonPlanet.com. When you're on the sites, you can also tune in 24 hours a day to my daily radio broadcast. There's also a free iPhone app to listen to the syndicated radio show when and where you want.